John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, and Eileen Wuornos are some of the many that have been killed from the death penalty. They all deserve to be from their serial killings, but what gives us the right to do so? Today I'm going to tell you the issues with the death penalty and why it needs to be abolished. I've researched both sides of this controversy, and the need to abolish the death penalty is the stronger argument. First, I'm going to tell you the expenses of the death penalty. Second, I'll tell you the risk that comes along with it. And last, I'll tell you its ineffectiveness and the question of human rights. Let me begin with the issues of the death penalty. The death penalty is expensive. Why? According to Richard C. Dieter, the executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center, almost all death penalty cases cannot afford their own lawyer. The state has to provide them. The expenses included in the death penalty are legal costs, pretrial costs, jury selection, trial, incarceration, and appeal costs. For example, between 1982 and 1997, counties spent a shocking $1.6 billion on capital crime trials, according to Catherine Baker in her article titled "The Budgetary Repercussions of Capital Convictions." Therefore, all of the murderers who can afford a great attorney usually get off with their crime. For example, Casey Anthony and O.J. Simpson both had great lawyers. They both got off with their crime. So for the poor and the minorities, they usually get the death penalty because they cannot afford a good lawyer, simply meaning it's unfair. Now that I've told you the costliness, I'll tell you the risk that comes along with it. There is a risk of killing the innocent. There was a story in the news recently about a man named Troy Davis who was put to death who's still trying to fight to prove his innocence. 7 of the 9 witnesses that stated they saw Davis kill a police officer in 1991 recanted their original testimony. The appeal to the Supreme Court was denied, and Davis was put to death on September 21, 2011. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, 138 people in 26 states have been exonerated from death row since 1973, with proof of their innocence. This proves that before the advances in technology, such as DNA testing, the justice system was and still is very capable of making mistakes. There is no way to tell if the over 1,000 people executed since 1973 were innocent, but there have been multiple cases where new evidence has emerged after the defendant has already been executed. My next issue is its ineffectiveness as a deterrent to murder. Supporters of the death penalty say that the death penalty makes a person think twice before killing. So let's think about this. They're crazy enough to take someone else's life. Do you honestly think they're going to think twice about having their own life taken away from them? And don't most murderers commit suicide after committing their crime, so wouldn't the death penalty be an incentive to kill? Statistics show in a current issues article titled "Capital Punishment" from the years 1990 through 2009, states with the death penalty have higher murder rates than the states without the death penalty. Also, supporters say that the death penalty gives justice to the family of the victim. But no matter what happens to the killer, the victim is still gone. They're not going to be brought back to life, and the family still has to live with that loss forever. And whoever thinks about the killer's family, I mean, don't you think they have feelings too? And it doesn't change what the killer did, but since when do we have the right to treat people as if they weren't humans? Which brings me to my next point, is the question of our rights. Does the government actually have the right to take someone's life? Wouldn't the death penalty be going against our 8th Amendment right of cruel and unusual punishment? There is a pattern of racial bias in sentencing that is clearly unconstitutional. Also, this sends the wrong message. We're going to kill someone for killing. It doesn't make sense, and it contradicts the whole idea. In conclusion, first I told you the costliness of the death penalty. Second, I told you the risk that comes along with it. Last, I told you the ineffectiveness and the question of our rights. So now it's time for you to vote. Vote to abolish the death penalty. 36 states still have the death penalty, including Texas. States without the death penalty have lower murder rates, so you decide which makes more sense.